Hey, welcome to week 2 of working on the garden. I want to introduce you to a couple of really cool plants. Right here, we've got lots of flowers that are coming up. You could probably see these in gardens around your neighborhood, but the specific plant I want to talk about is this right here. This is called lamb's quarter, and so here's a really good view of it. It grows all over Colorado, and it's a natural spinach. It's desert tolerant, and it's super high in the protein called lysine. I love it. You can eat it raw. It's just the most amazing thing. And what I love about this is that it's an early springtime. It's basically a weed, like you can see it just taking over here. And so one of the things that I do is I will go through my patches every day, especially when I'm working in the garden, and I'll just pull out some and eat some as I go. And the reason for that is because I'm actually thinning the garden to allow other ones to get bigger and bigger. What's really nice about this stuff is when they get about a foot or two tall, you can harvest them and keep their leaves, and they freeze really well, and then you can have that as a really good wintertime food source. So basically, my goal is to get all my lamb's quarter in the next month for the entire year. And so, yeah, that's just a really beneficial, wonderful weed coming on, or a quote-unquote weed. Another thing, this is something that I have going. I've got this big greenhouse, and we can take a look inside. You don't have to have one of these, but I wanted to show you what is going on. See, I've got all my starter trays. This is a really nice place to start my plants because it's not too hot and it's not too cold. And so it allows the plants to be used to most of sunlight, and the plants can be used to most of the temperature. I say that because there's certain plants like tomatoes that they really like warm weather. And what's great is, for example, that tray right there is full of tomato plants, and there's none of them popping up yet because they know that it's not quite warm enough. Even though they're in this warm area where other things are thriving and getting ready to rock and roll, that's an example of something that's not. On the other hand, we do have other plants that are starting to pop up that they're ready, and so they can kind of adjust to the heat themselves. It's a really good way to extend your growing season. And if you don't have a little mini greenhouse like that, I want to show you just something else. Right in my laundry room, we've just got a little tray, and we've got all of these little starts here in the sunshine. So again, it's a really protected area, but I can get some starts going, and hopefully they'll be ready to go in another month. Usually the frost date in a place like Montrose is about May 15th. And so after May 15th, I'll be planting a lot more, and I'm just trying to get those going because obviously we have a short growing season here in Colorado, and we want to grow as much as we can in the short time that we have. Here we are up front at the garden. There's Edwin, there's the chickens, and I want to show you something. This is really cool. The greens are just going crazy. So I'm already at the point where we're not going to be buying any more greens at the store. And then right here you can see the top of the kale. It's actually starting to blossom, and I can't wait. It kind of almost looks like a broccoli because it's in the same family. A couple things about kale. The first one is that you'll be able to harvest this plant for a long time, and the best thing to do is just to break off the lower leaves, and you can eat these ones right away. The upper leaves, if you just break off the lower leaves, see how there's a lower leaf anyway that's turned yellow because it's dead. So basically I'm just breaking off these leaves before they die and eating them, leaving the new growth to rise. With things like lettuce, you can just chop it off and it'll actually come back to life 2 or 3 times before it gets really bitter. Those chickens see this kale and they really want some, so I'm going to give them some. Kind of a funny thing about chickens too is if you give them greens in addition to their grains, they need 30% less grains. So basically they're like humans. If you have a well-balanced diet, you don't need as much of a certain stuff. The other day, and I just kind of want to show you around, see, there's all these different flowers coming up, and a lot of these flowers right here, they aren't even necessarily edible flowers or providing any use for me, quote unquote use. The reason I let them all grow and I have so many flowers around my house is a couple things. One of them is, who knows what kind of paint and is in these asbestos walls, so I don't want to necessarily be growing the food right up against my house. Another thing is that those flowers will attract bees year-round, and bees are obviously a really wonderful and important thing. And so a lot of decorative flowers, if you're kind of having to choose between like, do I garden, do I have decorative flowers, you should have both, because the decorative flowers will attract bees when your vegetables won't. So for example, I was just showing you the kale flowers, these ones which haven't opened up yet, but I've got these other flowers that are coming in, and those will feed the bees as well. One final note, and you may be surprised to hear me say this, but over here I've got a big area of that lamb's quarter, that thing that I showed you before, but in between there's all of this horrible bindweed. I hate to admit it, but I occasionally use Roundup. Here's why. It is exhausting to be a gardener by hand all the time, and I really don't like Roundup. The only time that I use it is once in the early season in very specific areas where I'm not going to be eating a lot of the food. And so with this bindweed, I gave everything just a quick squirt. I wore gloves, I used a very low dose, and I'm definitely not going to ever spray like over there where I've got my lettuces and other things. This is just kind of a periphery garden in this area, and that can kind of keep the weeds under control, because here's the thing, if I don't spray these weeds and kill them, then I'm going to have to be out here spending at least an hour every day for the rest of summer. And so again, I'm not happy about it, but I just don't know any other way, because what I found is that in terms of like time management of keeping a productive garden, unless you use massive amounts of black plastic, which in itself isn't the greatest, that's kind of just the compromise that I've made. Also, to put things in perspective, that lawn right there got sprayed with about 20 pounds of Roundup this morning. And fortunately, the wind is blowing from here to there, so we've just closed the windows and sealed the place up. And I'm gonna go inside too, so I don't have to breathe it. But yeah, just a little thing about growing. Obviously, keep the dandelions. We'll be back next week, and hopefully it'll be time to transplant some things like broccolis that I've been starting from scratch. Thanks.